Welcome to Restore Wellness. We're here with a podcast, and I'm George Brunneman.
Keith Tennefeld.
And Jimbo Collins.
And in light of the recent events and the heavy news coverage, we're going to talk about COVID yet again. This time from the perspective of we now know what the master of ceremonies himself, Mr. Fauci, can't call him a doctor, he's not real. But Mr. Fauci was thinking about this the whole time. He was telling us one thing and then writing in his diary the opposite. Right. So, Keith, you had a ton of experience during COVID. We're going to be talking about that a little bit.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights underneath the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Where have I heard that before?
It got really annoying, didn't it? Yeah, if you guys watched any of those hearings, you saw basically Congress coming at Fauci with the real facts. I followed through the entire situation. I know where they're coming up with this information, emails that were leaked that were being spread about Dr. Fauci trying to cover up the source of the Wuhan lab situation, the cover up of the lab. And I think that the biggest thing that came out of that for the whole population of the American people was Congress is giving everyone the facts, whether we knew that Fauci was going to answer them or not, to say yes or no, but we were presenting the situation.
At least you got to hear it from a reliable source, a fairly reliable source, although you can question their intentions. But I think there's some basic things that were learned during COVID that we will never fall for again. I still say on day one of COVID, they were just amazed that people did what they were told. When they said you're going to have to stay home for 15 days to flatten the curve, people stayed home. I couldn't believe they did that.
Yeah.
And then it's like they got power drunk after that. And they're, not only that, you can't get within 6 feet. You can't visit your dying grandma. I mean, the rules became crazy.
It was.
And I got to talk about the one that set me off the most, and that was trust the science. Now, I'm not a scientist. I'm an engineer, so I'm sort of scientist adjacent. But everything they were talking about was just ludicrous. And to me, the epitome of the most ridiculous claim during COVID was all of this about the masks. And I'm going to play something from the Ohio source on that and what she had to say about COVID and wearing masks.
Meanwhile, the cloth mask is a great alternative, and the CDC has always had guidance on using bandanas, scarves, any kind of cloth. So I'm anxiously awaiting this guidance alongside you. But definitely, I think a lot of people have reached out to me. Remember when Fran DeWine was here showing some of those cloth masks? I think it's a great thing to be making. It'll help all of us do this, but do it all the time. And we can use that when we're out and about on errands.
She looks like she's coming out of her own skin, first of all.
Why wasn't she wearing a mask?
That's a great question. And neither was the person signing.
Right. And what was she signing? Was she saying BS? Yeah. She's lying. This is not right.
We can only guess. So here's I used to say during the COVID era, I would always say, using a cloth mask to stop the COVID virus is like trying to stop mosquitoes with a fence, with a regular fence. I was wrong, and I stand corrected. So this is a realistic scale drawing. So if these are the threads of a mask, and that's the hole between the threads, that's 50 micrometers. Now, if you've got a magnifying glass, and this is an 8K video, right here in the middle is a dot. And I'll blow it up so you can see it. That dot is the size of a COVID virus. It's 500 times smaller than the distance between the threads on the mask. 500 times. And yet, everybody had to wear these things. And then they got really specific. You couldn't wear a bandana, but you could wear, a pair of underwear in front of your face, and that's going to work better.
Right.
It had nothing to do with science. In fact, it was blatantly anti-science, yet they got away with that. The same with the 6-foot distance. It was purely made up. Yeah. And now, according to Fauci's own writings in his diary, he knew they were made up. Yep. And yet we were all forced to live by that. It's absolutely crazy.
And I just remember, if you think about it, back in the day, I was an essential worker, so I was always driving to work and whatever have you, and there was no traffic. Nothing was open. It was like ghost town wherever you went. Very, very eerie times,
Yeah. My favorite thing about this truth all coming out now is that all of us conspiracy theorists, which I call truth theorists, and we know the truth 6 months or a year, or however long before everybody else does. It all comes out. So, I mean, the people who stood against it and knew the truth and didn't trust all the science and the pandemic, it's obvious now. We have.
And I think the two worst side effects were the effect it had on children. So first of all, I still remember in the early month of COVID, I went and downloaded all the CDC data. And as far as I could tell, if you were under the age of 65 or so, you had nothing to worry about. And that held true through the whole thing. It came down a little. It turns out if you were already in hospice care, you had a problem with COVID. But, those were the only people under the age of 65 that died. Right. And then they say, okay, children under the age of 5 should get this new miracle shot. You can't call it a vaccine. It's not a vaccine. mRNA it's hijacking the DNA of your body to create a drug or to create something that wasn't meant to be human, the spike protein. Giving that to a 5-year-old is insane.
And, and I have children that are in my practice that have been vaccinated, and they've come to me, thank God, and we're doing some good work with them and getting them back on their feet. But these kids were sick, from a vaccine, and there's a lot of kids out there that are still sick, and we're still seeing a lot of people with post-vaccine injuries that are coming with this chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorders, shortness of breath, brain fog. I mean, the amount of things that I'm seeing now. Originally, it kind of staged it out this way. You got these people who I saw someone research talk about that the people who got sick after a COVID vaccine, that within what I'm talking about is like they got vaccinated and within 3 days they had symptoms. 50% of those died.
Wow.
And what was interesting too is that obviously there was these stages where people either got really, really sick and died, but then there was blood clots, right? Everybody was coming with blood clots. Right. And so blood clot. So that was the immediate reaction. And if you were lucky to survive the, thrombosis blood clot arena, now you're dealing with chronic fatigue and brain fog and autoimmune disorders.
Let's talk a little bit, because I think the first time I actually went in to see you as your practice was to get the prescription for how do you get rid of the vaccine, how do you get rid of the spike protein. How is that working out? Are you still having success with, what was it, ivermectin,
nattokinase, and black sea cumin, and there's some other ones like nicotine. Dr. Brian Ardis makes a really good point about the argument about the benefits of nicotine. And what's really strange about nicotine, by the way, side note, is that there were people that you would think with this respiratory virus that would come in, oh, you smoke cigarettes, you're going to die. You got a respiratory virus. But no, they actually looked better and did better. So I think Brian Ardis was onto something. But yeah, it's ivermectin, black sea cumin oil, bromelain, and then the nattokinase. Nattokinase is an antithrombotic. It helps break up any fibrin formation, so that's very, very important. Bromelain is an enzyme that basically breaks and releases the COVID spike protein from the ACE receptor, along with black sea cumin, which is the antiviral. Works very well in those, and it's also has to help out with shedding the gut. Monolaurin, which is another very interesting thing. It's a derivative lauric acid from coconut oil and found in breast milk. And monolaurin is also a COVID gut disruptor. So if you had really bad COVID or you got vaccinated, it was another good one.
So go out there. You can find this protocol that Keith just described. It's all over. Just search for it. So there is a way to get rid of some of the problems that you have if you were forced to get the vaccine, like some of us.
Right. And people had to choose between their life and their careers, and I don't understand why if this was legit and the jabs were effective, why do you care if somebody else has it? If you have the vaccine or the jab,
then you can't get it. So why
does it matter if somebody else has to have it? I mean,
you would think you were protected, right?
It makes sense. It's not logical. There's nothing logical about the entire.
What was very strange about this too is it was political. It very much was political when you had people who were vaccinated versus not vaccinated. And, I hate drawing lines, but 90% of the vaccinated were blue and the 90% of the, unvaccinated were red by choice unless they had to be vaccinated because of their job. Police officers, firefighters, nurses, and doctors, they were all having to get vaccinated, but they were conservative. And they hated it. They thought they were being violated.
Biggest mistake.
Well, we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but like what I went through as a business owner, as a gym owner, they were, forcing people to shut down and do all these things. And, I was taking arrows from all corners. I had people who were supporting me because, I kind of stayed open a little bit, but it was something I didn't want to promote because, I was willing to just, stand my ground and do what I believe was right. But it was a crazy time. There was a lot of division.
What I know now about the benefits of muscle, and muscle being medicine. And the more muscle you have, the lower, risk of all-cause mortality that you have. If you ask me, a gym would have been an essential place.
I think anything that pays your bills and feeds your family is essential. And I actually had Jimbo T-shirts made during that time, and it was Jimbo's on the front and the back just said essential since 2003.
Yeah,
because it is my livelihood, it's my career, and everybody's job. All this essential, non-essential is just another bunch of.
Well, and they would shut down churches, but abortion centers were allowed to stay open, and bars were open.
Wow.
It was absolutely crazy.
The devil had his hand in this 100%.
Well, and I think he was testifying in front of Congress.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the connection with HIV and that whole situation is just, diabolical. And you're right. What is the difference between truth and a conspiracy? And it's usually about 3 months.
Yep.
That certainly was true in this one. Yeah. So some of the conspiracies that were absolutely true, I remember early on I happened to see a molecular drawing of a standard coronavirus from a common cold and the coronavirus with the spike protein. And my first comment was, that doesn't look natural. It looks like they took this guy and stuck something on the side of it, which is what you would do if you had a genome splicer and doing gain-of-function research. Yeah. So as soon as they said the Wuhan lab, Wahoo lab.
It was Wahoo.
Up in Cleveland. The Wuhan labs made total sense. It couldn't have been somebody that ate a bat and suddenly their DNA changed and their coronavirus has changed. There's just no way.
Right.
So there was so much early on that made me say, this is just doesn't smell right. It doesn't pass the smell test. As things went on, like I said, once they realized people were going to do as they were told, it quickly became a game where if you don't say what we want you to say, we've got to shut that down too. So,
I got kicked off of LinkedIn because I said something. I'm not
oh,
allowed
really?
back on. Yeah. So, I mean, these profiles were ridiculous. This censoring that they were doing. Yeah. And that's so much for the First Amendment, right?
Well, not only First Amendment, but, questioning something like, the efficacy of wearing a cloth mask in stopping a 0.1 micron virus.
Well, like I told you guys before, I went to a funeral during COVID, and half jokingly, I told them that there's only 2 people at the funeral that didn't have a mask on. It was me and the person who the funeral was for. So, I wasn't going to fall for it. I was going to stand my ground and do what I knew was right. I thought everything was ridiculous. People wearing rubber gloves and wearing masks and all that stuff. It was
fun that always got me is they put something next to gas stations so that you wouldn't have to grab the handle of a gas pump. And I'm like, the dirtiest thing on the planet.
Yeah. It just shows you how you can manipulate an entire society with fear, and people do not think for themselves. I mean, the term that everybody was using is sheep, the sheep, and that's so true. It makes you realize how easy it is to control an entire society.
And they did it through fear.
Yes.
Germophobic, death, everything else. Now, people, honestly, were really sick. People were coming to me, and they were trying to die.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. You had some tremendous success during COVID, not using remdesivir and the vaccines and the respirators. So
Correct.
what was it you were doing? How did you get? You mentioned FLCCC, right. And I know that was a key one.
They were very.
What you were doing during COVID?
First of all, we were doing a lot of research, thinking way back, going back to the drawing boards of how viruses were managed. What supplements worked very well, vitamin C, D, zinc, and that's where Dr. Zelensky came out. We realized that zinc was a very powerful antiviral, and as long as you have an inophore like hydroxychloroquine or quercetin, you could get that zinc into the cell, and it would significantly reduce the viral load, and then you would end up living. And then combining that with nasal spray to knock out the virus in the sinus cavities, which help reduce the viral load, and then using ivermectin has also been shown to be an antiviral piece to this. And it all began to work out very, very well. We were following Dr. Peter Corey and Peter McCullough, which you probably heard a lot about him lately. He's the background in wellness. He actually was the gentleman that was presenting a lot of the information during the Fauci's interrogation, where he brought a lot of information to Congress in the beginning, talking about autopsy reports and the clots that were being pulled out. They'd never seen clots like this before until the COVID vaccine, and they were only found in COVID vaccine. So there was undeniable evidence that said that this COVID virus was real. At the same time, the vaccines were killing people. And so what I was really focusing on at the time was managing people's illness and the infection. And we did that through antivirals, but also this was creating a histamine reaction, much like an allergic reaction, because you're putting a foreign antigen in the body. It's not
The spike protein.
Yeah, it's not a normal virus. Yeah. So normal viruses are treated by the immune system, whereas foreign things, like such as a bee sting or something strange, is treated like an allergic reaction. And people were managing the virus from an antiviral standpoint, but not an allergic reaction standpoint. So one of the tricks that I was doing was giving them antihistamines, Benadryl and Pepsid, and whether it be IV and then ivermectin for the antiviral piece. And magically, and people, by the way, would come into us, and this is the scariest thing, guys. When you have people coming in, their saturations are 70%, they're huffing and puffing, they're looking like they're dying. You're wondering if they got a blood clot. The whole work was nuts. But I had to put them on the bed, give them IVs, give them IV fluids, give them drugs right there, and watch them, put them on oxygen, and send them home with an oxygen concentrator, and pray that they made it. And sure enough, 2 days later, it was clockwork. He'll be fine in 2 days. You'll be fine. And to the point where I felt confident saying, I know this sucks. I know you're scared. Trust me on this. Take everything like we talked about. You'll be better in 2 days. And some people would be better within the first dose. And how is that possible? One dose and they flip around. So it was such a trying time, a little bit of PTSD. I would have to admit, sometimes I felt like I was wearing a cape. But it was an easy one. It was a duty. I was called to this. I always told God, you get me through nurse practitioner school, because I was actually working 2 jobs, going to nurse practitioner school, raising 9 kids. Well, at the time it was 8 kids, and it was insane. And I said, I will serve your people. And then the pandemic came as soon as I graduated. So very, very, very trying, but blessed time for people like us to step up to the plate and really stand behind each other and help. So
you had success. Did you have to pay a price for that? Did anyone turn you into the medical boards?
Yeah. Yep. I had the Ohio Nursing Board come after me because someone filed a complaint because one of their patients was a VA patient, very sick, had a lot of comorbidities. We gave ivermectin to, and then came back in to see us. And the provider at the time wasn't comfortable managing the way I was managing it, such as putting IV in, giving steroids, antihistamines. Just went ahead and sent them to the ER. And then at that point, they said, why is he so sick? Blah, blah, he's got COVID, he's got blah, blah, blah. And, there was ivermectin. Must be the ivermectin that he's sick. And then they ended up filing a complaint. And that complaint got pushed. They were fine with it. They did all their due diligence. They knew what we were doing. We were using ivermectin off-label.
Well, and you've got hundreds of success stories, so.
Right. And once we were able to explain it with science-based rationale, why we were doing this, it wasn't folk medicine. It was doing really what we were doing. And they just said, okay. And we never heard from them again, And now similarly, the same thing's happening with ivermectin and cancer.
Right.
And so we're having to be but what's interesting about that is the same thing with what we saw, is that now we've got oncologists that are beginning to accept the understanding, because there's research out there, there's people that are coming in saying, hey, I'm still alive. I'm on ivermectin, I'm still alive. And so there's a lot of proof in the pudding. And I think this is a great time for us to maybe reconsider how we go about science. Maybe it's time that we start using, rational thinking, observational situations, and not have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars in multiple years to get something pushed through, when we know, hey guys, natokinase can actually reverse cardiovascular disease if taken at a certain dose for a period of time. Hey, there's not a drug in the market that can do that, but natokinase is here now. And if it wasn't for that COVID thing, then many, many people wouldn't even know about natokinase, and now they're benefiting from it.
Yeah, I think the biggest lessons learned was COVID taught us, first of all, the parents that the kids were now learning in school, and they could watch the class because they were doing it online. They all looked at that and said, oh my God, what are you teaching my children? So I think it woke everybody's eyes up unintentionally to what was going on in the schools. And now you're seeing, homeschooling's taking off, charter schools are taking off, and everybody's like, indoctrination was obvious when you had to sit there and watch them in front of their computer. I think the other thing that was obvious was most doctors do what they're told, not what they see as effective. Now, how many people are on statins? And none of them are better off for being on statins. I think it's the same thing now. People are starting to question, hey, there's tons of books out there to explain why you need cholesterol. Your brain's made of cholesterol. It's the building block for most hormones. It's like, holy cow, there's tons of evidence on why it would be a really bad idea to start suppressing your cholesterol. So I think the fact that it woke people up in some respects is good. We still have the issue where I think I've heard from many people that the older generation still thinks that the vaccine saved them, that the lockdown saved them, that the masks saved them, and nothing you say is going to change their mind.
And there's a debate about, you saw they're saying how all these heart attacks are going to start happening, and
the turbo cancers.
Right. And turbo cancers, heart attacks. And I think, you saw the soccer players drop and they're saying, the debate was, it's the COVID, it's not the jab, right? But we know it was the jab because there was all kinds of studies showing people who never even got COVID, got the jab and were dying of heart attacks. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but the percentage of heart attacks in males between 18 and 50 were up like 80% during that period of time. It's a ridiculous
And then
number.
if we look at the vaccine adverse reaction reporting database, it was, you have these little blurps over time, let's say tetanus, whatever. But then the vaccine came out and it's like spiked up off the charts to the point where they actually started deleting the data and suppressing the data or letting the.
Always a great.
Well, in my experience, just at my gym, during COVID, right after COVID, a number of years after COVID, there's been a handful of my clients and members who have heart issues who are vaccinated, and there has been a number of people who died of heart attacks. I mean, I've been in business for, going on 24 years, and I've been personal training longer than that. And all my years of training, 10 to 30 people a day and having hundreds and hundreds of members, I don't recall ever knowing or having any of my clients die of heart attacks just randomly. But how come within a 3-year period, right toward the end of COVID and up till up to recently, I have a handful of people from my gym who died of heart attacks. And that's just in my own community, right. We all know that they were all shot. So, I mean, isn't that wild?
It's
so
sad
look at that
too.
small demographic right there and put that in a large scale and see, what that would be.
What can we do? What needs to be done to prevent the takeover of our lives again the next time something crazy happens? I mean, there was some disease coming out that, like measles. They're saying everybody's got to be worried about measles, but 1 out of a million.
I say this all the time, and I had this conversation a million times, and I've always said, what's your authority, right? My authority is God. It's not the system. It's not the doctor. It's not the Western medicine. It's not the government. My authority is God. So I trust in. He gave me an immune system. He created the earth I live on to provide the nutrition and the things that we need. People trust in the system. People trust in their authority. It's hard for them, as when you're a kid, you listen to authority. You do what you're told. You do what you're told. Next thing you know, you wake up and you're 50 years old. You've been doing what you've been told your whole life. You don't think for yourself. And I think that's the biggest problem. People are too easily led the wrong way.
I mean, they're led because they aren't taught to have leadership thought process, not taught to have critical thinking. They're taught to sit and obey in a classroom, digest what they've been told from the teacher, regurgitate it exactly the way they're told, and then they get a grade based on how well they can retain and regurgitate that information versus going, hey, how would you do this? Let me see what your imagination can do. And I honestly think imagination is a tool. It's a very powerful tool. And to overcome this situation that you were talking about, to answer that, is that we would have to begin to say, listen, we knew what that was. We've been told wrong. So if the government or whoever wanted to do this again, they're going to have to use force next time because we're not going to do it.
I think that's true.
The animals of this world, the human beings, our core beliefs have been altered forever. And we will not follow that paradigm again.
Or our core beliefs have been reinforced.
And there was a lot of force.
That's
such a good
and there
point.
was force used on a lot of people. That was one of the things that I got talked about. I talked to my friend who was running for sheriff. I talked to some judge friends of mine, and they're like, you can do what you want, but you can get arrested. You stay completely open. You just keep it wide open, and you keep it to where it's out in the open and you're promoting that. Do I want to go through that just to make a stance? Part of me did, but I was like, at the end of the day, do I want to deal with the hassle?
You're playing chess. You played it smart.
That's the thing. And people were pushed with fear into being, making that decision, choosing between their livelihood and getting the jab.
So to some extent, I think we can apply what we learned from COVID to a bunch of things dealing with wellness. So when the world's telling you need to take statins, you need to take GLP-1s, you need to do this, this, and this, but as you just said, we've got this amazing body with its feedback loops and ability to adapt. Maybe the answer isn't introducing all these foreign things. Maybe the thing is find out what I should be eating more. And in the case of eating and nutrition, it seems like the closer you get to what cavemen did, the better you're going to be.
I don't think God made us inadequate. Like, he did not make us inadequate to where we need to create a man-made drug or medicine to put into our body because our body can't do it. That's
well, and I don't mean to be a devil's advocate here, but like thinking about the bubonic plague and these plagues that came across and wiped out the world, and God knows, I mean, who knows what that could have been like, right? And
that was on purpose.
Yeah, when you look back, you wonder about that. But there were some real plagues that happened, but they happen in all species. But I think what's really important now that we have information, education, health, and wellness is, for instance, the COVID virus was man-made. It was articulated. They plucked out this very potent, very contagious, virus and slapped it into a standard coronavirus. And the cleave, coronaviruses are great to work with because they have this empty space and you can put whatever you want in there and make it do funny things. And so they wrote above the science genome of the human being so that it was unnatural. And so what we have to do is really say, okay, wait a minute. You made this unnatural thing. What do we need to do that's in nature that is even more powerful than this unnatural thing? And we're going to be faced with that for a long time because everybody's monkeying.
And a lot of the drugs, the ones that they have a hard time patenting, come from natural sources. Isn't ivermectin like some kind of weird soil mold of some sort?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they can't. Aspirin's the bark of a tree. There's a bunch of stuff like that.
Like you mentioned before, an antiparasitic, we discovered how well it works on cancer, which is, that's a whole other conversation that we've really done a lot of work with. But it is, if Big Pharma can't patent it and make big money on it, then it doesn't work.
Yep. Well, and you're coming right back to muscle is medicine. How are you going to patent working out, 3 days a week with weights?
And the other thing that's fascinating, like we're going to talk about, at a different time, is the different modalities. But, I've gotten so into the hyperbaric oxygen therapy for cancer treatment and things like that. Imagine with the people with the lung issues they were having with COVID, hyperbaric oxygen therapy during that time.
Right. That would have been fantastic. Great idea.
Yeah.
Yep. And I do want to say two things about this is that emergency use authorization of a vaccine that come out before there was good research was only allowed if there was no safe and alternative effective options, which ivermectin was, which hydroxychloroquine was. And they came out and said, don't take the horse medicine, don't take the bleach, which is chlorine dioxide, which is not bleach. And there was all these things that were telling the society, don't go do this. And they shunned that so that way they could come out with the vaccine, and Pfizer and Moderna made millions and billions of dollars off of people's death. So that's an atrocity, and I hope to hell that gets accounted for. The other situation was interesting is that because of the lockdowns, no one went to see their doctors for routine checkups, and so therefore they didn't get their routine flu vaccine. And no one came up with the flu that year. Right. And so it's what is that? Is that correlation? Is that correlational observation? Was it the lockdowns that kept the flu away? I don't know. If the lockdowns didn't keep the COVID virus away, why would it keep the flu virus away?
And don't forget to mention that the number one legal drug dealer, Fauci, was getting royalties on all the vaccines he was pushing. So, like I said before, if you believe in the vaccine and you thought it worked, why do you care if this person has it? If you have it, you're fine.
You took it.
You're fine. The guy next to you, it doesn't matter if they have
it.
And
then the same thing happened in the hospital with remdesivir. Remdesivir was showing, it was like, hey, we're going to give you a 50-50 shot at this drug. You may die. You may have renal failure. You may have liver failure. Or you may live. But meanwhile, you had ivermectin that was saying, wait a minute, these guys are doing something with this. I'm seeing the health benefits, and there's no side effects. And so I can't believe that the people that were in the hospital that were seeing the odds against remdesivir were actually using it. That were actually saying, okay, here we go. Here's a little shot out in the dark. And why weren't they researching? Why weren't they looking at the FLCCC and the data like that? Why were they?
Because the motive.
I mean, I believe the doctors are very good. I think that I've worked with doctors for 30 years. I think their heart is in the right place. But my question is what prevented them, honestly, from not looking outside the box?
They didn't want to lose their license.
Right.
But if an entire organization or for instance, if a pulmonary unit ICU team came together and said, we are going to stand behind this modality, then they would be able to push that modality through. That's called cowboy. It's called bravery. It's called courage. And you make those changes. Like, for instance, IV vitamin C, high dose IV vitamin C can actually help and cure sepsis without having to give multiple
profitable
antibiotics.
enough?
No, it's not. Exactly.
That's the point. The modality is not profitable enough.
My question is who prevented doctors from making that decision?
John D. Rockefeller.
I guess. So if there's any doctors out there that are listening right now and they've been into the hospital and you guys felt called to do something else or try something, but it got blocked, I want to know how it got blocked, who blocked it, at what level did it get blocked. Please email that, give us a call. I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you on the show. Yeah. Okay.
We talk about that too. The first 100 years as a country, we used holistic medicines.
Right.
You know, you can look at the whole
Well, Thomas Seyfried, the interview we did with him, he talks about, Hitler knew the cure to cancer
because of auto work.
But then they buried it.
But also, Russia came out with a research article that showed that antiparasitics cured cancer a long time ago, and our own CIA shut it down.
Well, we're getting off to the next conspiracy theory that'll be proved true in 3 months. Thanks for listening. Hit us with any comments. It's info@restorewellness.org. Or give us a call, 513-400-4228. We'd love to hear from you. If you got ideas for other shows, if you want to give us some comments or shout out or yell at us for whatever reason, just give us a holler.
And feel free to subscribe to our channel. Go ahead and share this channel. Do plenty of likes. Those are all good things that help spread this information. So anytime that you do share or that you do like, it helps this information get out there. So please keep that up there for us. If you want to do your part, that's one way to do it. Thank you.
Thanks.